Hello, I'm your host, Cyril Bernadette, and this is Africa Focus.
Seychelles is far from picture perfect. The tiny archipelago nation is battling what officials say are the world's highest rates of heroin addiction. Egypt's population reached 100 million people according to the country's official statistics agency. The new statistics were announced by the Central Agency of Public Mobilization and Statistics at a news conference. While on a visit to Ethiopia, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo comments on the outbreak of the new coronavirus and U.S. plans to provide funds to support countries around the world.
Let's take a look at the news that made headlines this week around the continent.
President Cyril Ramaphosa slammed remarks made by South Africa's last apartheid-era leader, F.W. de Klerk, saying it was treasonous to deny that race segregation was a crime against humanity. Ramaphosa, answering questions in Parliament, broke public silence on de Klerk's comments, which the former president withdrew following an outcry. Apartheid is a crime against humanity. It was a crime against the oppressed people of South Africa, even before it was so declared by the UN, Ramaphosa told Parliament to loud applause. He went ahead to say that to deny this in his view is treasonous. De Klerk, aged 83, shared the Nobel Peace Prize with Nelson Mandela in 1993 for dismantling white minority rule and ushering in democracy. But in an interview on the national broadcaster SABC, he sparked fury by denying the apartheid was a crime against humanity, despite the UN declaring it such. The idea that apartheid was a crime against humanity was and remains an agito project initiated by the Soviets and their ANC-SSCP allies to stigmatize white South Africans by associating them with genuine crimes against humanity. The ANC is the ruling African National Congress, which under Mandela fought an underground battle against apartheid. The SSCP was its ally at the time, which is the South African Communist Party. De Klerk's remarks culminated in lawmakers from the far-left economic freedom fighters staging a rowdy protest in Parliament at the annual State of the Union address, demanding he be ejected from the legislature. De Klerk retracted the remarks and apologized for the confusion, anger, and hurt that he had caused. Under apartheid, rule by the white minority was entrenched by law and brutally enforced by agents of the state. Black South Africans faced denial of fundamental rights and discrimination in many forms. Today, despite the end of apartheid a generation ago, racial tensions in South Africa remain high and economic inequality and poverty run deep.
Sudanese police fired tear gas at hundreds of protesters in Khartoum, calling for the reinstatement of soldiers forced into retirement after having voiced support for last year's revolution. The protesters, mostly youths, gathered near the presidential palace, carrying Sudanese flags and signs reading, "The army is Sudan's army, and don't dismiss the army's free men." They burned tires and blocked roads before police fired tear gas to disperse them. Earlier in the week, the military published a list of officers of various ranks who had been forced into retirement. Army spokesman Brigadier Amer Mohammad Al-Hassan, quoted by state news agency SUNA, said the list was issued as usual of the beginning of each new year. Hassan said there is no place in the armed forces for anyone who is promoting any political activity. This directive was from the leadership. But activists launched a social media campaign backing sideline Lieutenant Muhammad al-Sadiq, who had voiced support for their campaign from the outset in December 2018 over soaring bread prices. The Sudanese Professional Association SPA, the umbrella group which led mass street protests that led to President Omar al-Bashir's downfall in April, organized the demonstration. SPA on its Facebook page condemned the police's excessive use of force and repression and urged Prime Minister Abdel Hamdok to immediately fire the Interior Minister and senior police officials. Bashir's ouster after 30 years in power led to months of talks that eventually produced a transitional government comprised of civilian and military officials. Months of anti-Bashir protests triggered clashes with security forces that left dozens dead, hundreds wounded, and thousands jailed.
Lesotho Prime Minister Thomas Thabane will be charged with the murder of his estranged wife, who was gunned down ahead of his inauguration in 2017, as the beleaguered premier announced he would quit by the end of July. Lilopelo Thabane, aged 58, was killed in June 2017 by unknown assailants on the outskirts of the capital Maseru, 2 days before the premier, now aged 80, took office. The couple had been embroiled in bitter divorce proceedings when Lilopelo was murdered in front of her home in the capital Maseru. Her death shook the tiny mountainous kingdom of Lesotho, which is entirely surrounded by South Africa. Police investigations found that communication records from the day of the murder included his cell phone number. Deputy Police Commissioner Paseka Mokete said that the 80-year-old Prime Minister will formally be charged with murder. Mokete said that it does not necessarily mean that he was there, but he was acting in common purpose. The case also drew in the Prime Minister's current wife, Maesa Thabane, aged 42, who had also been charged with the same murder of her rival. She was charged under common purpose even though she did not pull the trigger, but people she was acting in consent with pulled the trigger, said Mokete by phone. Sporting a bright yellow outfit complete with a matching headscarf, she sat straight-faced next to the Prime Minister during the inauguration that was held at the stadium in Maseru 2 days after the murder. The long unresolved murder had plunged the Prime Minister's leadership into question, forcing his All Basotho Convention party to ask him to resign.
Now, millions worldwide may have seen the desert fortress in the hit fantasy series Game of Thrones, but fewer know that they can visit the Moroccan village of Ait Ben Haddou, which is rich in cinematic heritage. Inhabitants of the village hope to draw fans to the historical site in order to boost the tourism sector.
The fortified old statement at the foot of the majestic Atlas Mountains enchanted audiences in the HBO series and has also served as a dusty backdrop for famous films, for instance in Ridley Scott's epic Swords and Gladiator. Unlike other famous locations from series history, the UNESCO World Heritage Site has so far missed out on a mass influx of tourism. However, the inhabitants of Ait Ben Haddou are optimistic that the tourism industry in the village will be boosted.
The Ait Ben Haddou site served as a backdrop for the shooting of the greatest films, including international masterpieces such as Lawrence of Arabia, Prince of Persia, Gladiator, and Game of Thrones. These are the most famous films they chose this site to shoot. Thus, this site has the attractiveness for both tourism and cinema.
Several people visit Ait Ben Haddou in southern Morocco's most famous fortress to see the site overlooking a valley 30 kilometers from the town. There's a mosque and 2 cemeteries for Muslims and Jews, and many homes converted into stalls selling handicrafts for tourists. The fortress, which is an ideal film setting, located a short distance from the studios of Moroccan cinema, inhabitants are privileged to witness the location's cinematic history.
Cinema tourism is particularly oriented around the film studios of Usadet. Although many places in the province have hosted film shoots, including Ait Ben Haddou, it is in our interest to provide a more structured cultural offer around cinema so that people can find out about the filming that took place here.
Young people in the village are pooling their limited resources towards an ambitious project, a museum in the fortress, gathering photography from the productions that have been filmed there.
We want to make a cinema museum here in the Kasbah Ait Ben Haddou to promote the cinematographic heritage of Ait Ben Haddou. When people hear about Ait Ben Haddou, they think about films like Game of Thrones, Gladiator, and Lawrence of Arabia. Yet there are other films that are shot here at Ait Ben Haddou that people don't know about.
Moroccan Desert Fortress Village, rich in cinematic heritage, hopes to draw Game of Thrones fans. However, tourism promoters are yet to capitalize on the connection.
Supporters of Louisa Hanoune, head of Algeria's Workers' Party, gathered for a demonstration demanding her release in the city of Blida. Hanoune and Bouteflika, the jailed brother of the former president, were due to appear at the military tribunal.
An Algerian military court started hearing an appeal against the 15-year jail term for the brother of former president Abdelaziz Bouteflika, who was brought down amid anti-regime protests last year following his bid to run for a fifth term in the country. Bouteflika, 62-year-old, had long served as a key presidential aide and was seen as the real power behind the presidency after the head of state suffered a stroke in 2013, which left him in a wheelchair. Bouteflika's brother, Said Bouteflika, was detained in May and sentenced to 15 years in jail in September, along with several other high-level regime officials for conspiring against the state and undermining the authority of the army. Army Chief of Staff Ahmed Salah promised to rid the country of corrupt politicians, military officials in order to restore confidence among the people. Protestants have also called for resignation of interim President Abdul Qadir bin Salah and Prime Minister Nourdine Bedawi.
Through this stand, in addition to the demand for the immediate and unconditional release of Mrs. Louisa Hanoune, we want to say that Algerian people have the right to practice politics. We must stop the abuse and prejudice towards the freedom of expression and the freedom of the press. Decision-making must return to the Algerian people in order for them to determine their fate.
According to local media, the appeals hearing opened in the mid-morning under tight security and behind closed doors at the Military Court of Appeal in Bilda, south of Algiers. Also in court to appeal their jail terms were two former intelligence chiefs, General Mohamed Lamine and General Athman Bashir, and a former political party leader known as Louisa Hanoune. However, Said Bouteflika refused to answer judges' questions after he appeared as a witness in a trial court of corruption of former regime members. He was accused of asking businessmen to raise money to finance for Bouteflika's campaign. The four had allegedly met in March 2019 in a bid to derail plans by the Army High Command to force the departure of President Bouteflika. Said Bouteflika allegedly wanted the intelligence bosses to dismiss the Army Chief of Staff at the time, General Ahmed Gaid Salah. However, defense lawyers hope the four will be released after Algeria's power balance shifted following the December 23rd death of Gaid Salah at the age of 79.
Egypt's Population Statistics Agency said that the country's population has passed 100 million, highlighting the threat of overpopulation in a poverty-stricken country where many live in crowded megacities.
The North African country retains its position as the most populous Arab nation and Africa's third most populous country, behind Nigeria and Ethiopia. A counter installed atop the Central Agency for Public Mobilization and Statistics, CAPMAS, ticked over into 9 digits for the first time, the agency said.
The population problem is one of the biggest challenges faced by Egypt, which is as important as the terrorism suffered by the community. Because of this rapid population increase, any development will not withstand, and any economic projects will be useless.
A new baby is born in Egypt roughly every 17.9 seconds, the statistics body calculated. Birth rates in Egypt have skyrocketed in the past 3 decades, with around 1.5 million babies born every year.
Significantly, this population increase affects the individual share of expenditures on education, health, housing, and transportation.
Overpopulation has presented a myriad of challenges for authorities in recent years, even with policies to stem the rapid growth. Egyptians numbered around 57 million 30 years ago. The last census in 2017 counted nearly 95 million citizens.
We're taking a short break, but coming up after the break.
Millions are facing starvation in Zambia, with average temperatures in the region rising twice as fast as the global mean.
Welcome back. Millions are facing starvation in Zambia, one of the countries hit hard by a severe drought in southern Africa, with average temperatures in the region rising twice as fast as the global mean.
Lizzie walked hours to fetch this food aid so she could feed her 4 children at least one meal a day.
Sometimes we eat once in a day. Sometimes when we find some other sources, we eat twice in a day.
A severe drought is gripping the area around Simungu in southern Zambia. Humanitarian groups are handing out maize and beans, the first distribution in the area. Food shortages also affect schooling.
I've got 70 pupils in my class. Just because of this hunger, there is absenteeism. Like for today, there were only 30 pupils in my class out of 70.
It rained recently, but don't be fooled by the greenery. Crops have been failing for years. 45 million people are at risk of famine in southern Africa, according to the UN's World Food Programme. 4 hours drive east lies the Kariba Dam, which produces around 40% of Zambia's electricity. But now, because of the drought, the turbines can't produce enough power.
For the year 2020, we are looking at a target of 275 megawatts. So basically that's about 25% of the plant capacity of the Kariba North Bank power station to be utilized as a result of the low water levels.
Lower rainfall is forcing farmers like Godfrey to change their methods. He now plants different varieties of crops and uses a water meter. If these measures fail, it will threaten his family's future.
There are no formal jobs in Zambia, so we have to farm to have food to eat. Secondly, this is how we put our children through school.
From a daily meal to school attendance and economic growth, climate change has spiraling effects that are hard to stop.
Thousands of demonstrators flooded the streets of the Moroccan capital to protest against a new U.S. Middle East peace plan, which the Palestinians say favors Israel. Under the plan, Israel would retain control of the Fanya, your turn, please. Thousands of demonstrators flooded the streets of the Moroccan capital to protest against a new U.S. Middle East peace plan, which the Palestinians says favors Israel. Under the plan, Israel would retain control of the disputed city of Jerusalem.
Carrying Palestinian flags, the demonstrators, including local politicians and trade unionists, marched in Rabat chanting "Long live Palestine." They called for a boycott of American products, denounced the United States as enemy of peace, and chanted Palestine is not for sale. Some of the demonstrators, who wore red, black, green, white scarves in the colors of the Palestinian standard, burned an Israeli flag, spoke against any attempt by Morocco to normalize ties with a Jewish state.
Today, we should not be talking about the deal of the century, but rather the theft of the century. It is the hold-up of the century.
Morocco has warming but quiet relationships with Israel and no formal diplomatic ties. Israel and Morocco opened liaison offices in each other's countries in the mid-1990s, but Rabat closed them after an escalation of Palestinian-Israeli violence in 2000. Elsewhere in North Africa, hundreds of Tunisians also protested against the U.S. peace plan in the eastern city of Esfat. Tunisia's powerful UGTT labor union organized the march called the Proposal, an Accord of Shame. Last month, United States President Donald Trump unveiled his Middle East plan for peace between Israel and the Palestinians, which the Palestinians have rejected as biased in favor of the Jewish state.
Under the plan, Israel would retain control of the disputed city of Jerusalem as its undivided capital and annex settlements of Palestinian lands. Palestinians, however, want all of East Jerusalem to be the capital of any future state.
We are taking part today in this march in Rabat to support the Palestinian situation and to say no as Moroccans, Arabs and Muslims, no to the agreement of the century, which doesn't represent either the free Moroccans, Arabs or Muslims. We're also here to say, like most of the participants here, that the Palestinian situation is everyone's business.
Popular demonstration is not only to support a people, but also to support truth and humanity.
The plan has also been rejected by the Arab League and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, two bodies in which Morocco is a prominent member. After Trump unveiled the plan, the foreign minister of Morocco, a key U.S. ally, said Rabat appreciates the constructive efforts for peace deployed by the United States for durable solution in the Middle East. Nasser Bourita went on to reiterate that Morocco's position is to support the creation of an independent Palestinian state.
Mangina town has been empty after a massacre that occurred by a dreaded rebel group which locals fear will strike again. So far, at least 300 people have been killed since October last year.
Mangina, a town of 72,000 in Democratic Republic of Congo's volatile east, has been empty after a massacre by a dreaded rebel group which locals fear will strike again. Fighters from the Allied Democratic Forces lead the draws of 8 people in Mangina, sparking panic and an exodus.
The situation is volatile. The killings in Mangina started the day before yesterday. ADF rebels raided Makusa, Ituri, the northern part of Mangina.
2 days later, a force of about 60 ADF members killed 2 women and 5 men at a nearby Makeke. The shops and markets were shattered in Mangina. The only signs of life were some patrolling soldiers, policemen and Red Cross officials. 3 armored vehicles of the UN mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo were stationed on the outskirts of the town, keeping watch over panicked residents fleeing their homes.
As I speak, there are already 12 bodies being buried at Makusa, and the 12 people are among the missing kidnapped by the ADF Ugandan rebels.
We are worried about the situation all the time, and it seems to have no end. The government needs to come to our aid and help the other victims too in the face of these massacres, which have lasted for years. We've had enough.
Mami Lolita, a mother of 6 in her 40s, was one of the many women and children leaving their homes for the relative safety to the nearby city of Beni, carrying their meager belongings in sacks. Our youngest child, aged 4, was barefoot and carrying a jerrycan with 5 liters of water on her head. The Beni region straddling the North Kivu and Ituri provinces has been repeatedly attacked by the ADF, which civic activists say have massacred more than 300 people since October.
No one is left in Mangina. The population of Mangina had already fled or moved to Beni.
At the same time, an Ebola epidemic declared in August 2018 with its center in Mangina is still active across the region, with a total of 2,353 deaths recorded among 3,431 registered cases. Efforts to contain the Ebola outbreak have been hindered by attacks on health workers and conflicts in East, where the ADF is among a host of armed groups.
On Africa Focus, we love hearing from you. Interact with us on our social media pages at Switch TV Kenya on Twitter, Switch TV Kenya on Facebook. And remember, you can view this program along with our wide array of other programs on DSTV channel 268, on Azam TV channel 138, and on Zuku channel 53. Thank you for keeping us company. Goodbye.